The latest charges against Donald Trump and his aides make it very likely the current May 2024 trial date will be pushed back. As NBC News senior correspondent, legal correspondent Laura Jarrett reports, the destruction of videotape evidence means more discovery from prosecutors, which means more opportunities to file motions to delay, meaning accountability, at least in this instance, could actually come later than expected. Joining me now is Democratic Congresswoman Zoe Lofgren of California. Of course, she served on the January 6th House Select Committee. Congresswoman, it is great to see you again. Thanks for coming back on the show. Let me just get your reaction to these new charges in the superseding indictment. Obviously, you have been behind the scenes investigating Trump's actions leading up to January 6th. Was there anything that surprised you as you saw the news come out this week?
Well, I guess a lot of us were expecting January 6th indictment based on the target letter timing. But honestly, I was shocked by the new charges, a superseding indictment down on the documents case. I was just a staffer when the Nixon impeachment was going on, but it's the cover-up that gets you. And these allegations in the indictment are very serious. If proven, I think the ex-president is in serious legal jeopardy.
So let me ask you about that, because, you know, as you just mentioned, and as we talked about, there's a lot of similarities between Nixon and Trump. You actually worked, as you just mentioned, on the Nixon impeachment as a law student in 1974 on then Congressman Don Edwards' staff. And you also worked on Trump's impeachments, both of them, I should note. How do these two moments in history compare? What did you learn through working on Nixon's impeachment that you were able to bring to Trump's?
Well, it's interesting because what I learned was really more about the Republican Party than the presidents who got themselves in trouble. When the truth came out about Nixon, it was irrefutable. Republican members of the House and Senate were shocked. They were ashamed. And they went to the president and said, your support is gone. You've got to leave. What's happening now, the current Republican Party leadership, at least, and most of even those members who don't agree don't speak up, there is no shame. The truth is just, dispensed with. Lies are just a strategy. It's a very different approach to the world and a very different sense of honor than was the case when Nixon was in trouble and his impeachment out of the Judiciary Committee.
To your point earlier, I think a lot of people were expecting this week's announcement to include an indictment on January the 6th. And look, it's very possible it might happen given the target letter, a possible indictment, in the ex-president's attempts to overturn the 2020 election. Of course, we're still waiting to see what happens in Georgia with Fani Willis, the DA there. In a piece you wrote for MSNBC.com that you've called Trump's election schemes, quote, the gravest threat to the constitutional order in modern history. Expand on that and what happens if there is no accountability for trying to overturn our election.
Well, essentially, Trump tried to overturn the Constitution. I mean, Richard Nixon corruptly used instruments of the government, but he wasn't on a mission to overturn the Constitution itself. That's what Trump tried to do. And it's worth noting, he has said that he intends, if he's reelected, to terminate aspects of the Constitution, which is, a stunning statement. And I've learned, as we went into this investigation, to pay attention to what Trump says, because it's what he intends to do. He intends to, he said, terminate parts of the Constitution, and he's been very overt about taking to the presidency authorities that don't belong to that branch of government. Really, it's a very ominous set of predictions that he's making should he be elected. I think we ought to pay attention to it. I think he means what he says.
Let me ask you about what we played earlier on the show. I'm not sure if you heard it, but it was Donald Trump in an interview saying that he is not going to stop no matter what happens on the legal front. And I'm curious to get your thoughts on where this may be going in terms of what accountability, what justice looks like. You know, in this piece that you wrote for MSNBC.com, you write about how the January 6th committee's work may be one of the most significant in American history, noting that you and your fellow Congress members may have very well pressured the Justice Department to take action. And in your view, what would it look like for Trump to finally face justice?
Well, I do think it's important that it's not just the foot soldiers that are brought to justice. I mean, the Department of Justice has indicted and convicted a whole number, hundreds of individuals who rioted and who attacked the police and the like. But until this target letter, there wasn't a strong indication that the insider-in-chief, the plotters, were actually going to be held to account, not just those who they incited. And I think that's important. There needs to be accountability at all levels, not just the people who did the violence at his behest. I do think, his comment that he would run for president from prison is an astonishing one. And really, I guess, shows the difference between the parties. I mean, the Republican Party is conservative, or it used to be, but it was a conservative party that had a sense of honor, just like the Democrats had a sense of honor. That appears to be gone now. Yeah. And his threats are, I think, a pretty shocking one. And the fact that he's continuing to lie to his supporters and that many of them don't have a source of actual news and they buy it is ominous as well. A lot of innocent people were harmed in January 6th, people who believed him. Yeah. And that's happening again.
Yeah, and to Michelle Goldberg's earlier point, I mean, he has managed to seal off the Republican Party from reality, and that's where we find ourselves today, a party that just doesn't believe in reality. Congresswoman Zoe Lofgren, it's always a pleasure. Thank you so much for your time and your insights.